My mom laughed and said, "We had more important plans," before skipping my 35th birthday dinner. I thought she had simply forgotten me. A week later, I discovered my birthday had been used to keep me away while my family secretly held a meeting that could steal my inheritance using a forged signature. The worst part? The birthday wasn't the betrayal. It was the distraction. If you think family would never do something like this, wait until you hear what happened next. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, what would you do if your own family skipped your birthday for more important plans? Would you forgive them? Or would you find out the truth? Now let me tell you exactly what happened. My name is Aria Muller, and on the night I turned 35, my mother laughed while telling me my birthday dinner wasn't worth her time. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I simply whispered, "I understand." At that moment, she believed the conversation was over. She had no idea it was the beginning of the biggest mistake she had ever made. If someone had told me that my 35th birthday would unravel a secret my family had hidden for years, I would have laughed. I thought the worst thing that could happen was spending my birthday alone. I was wrong. The truth waiting behind that empty dinner reservation was far more devastating than simple disappointment. My name is Aria Muller. I'm 35 years old, and I live in Seattle, Washington. For more than a decade, I've worked as a financial compliance consultant, helping companies uncover fraud, financial misconduct, and hidden conflicts of interest. My career has taught me to notice details that most people overlook. Small inconsistencies often reveal much larger truths. Ironically, despite making a living exposing deception, I never realized how much deception existed inside my own family. My mother, Diane Muller, had always cared deeply about appearances. To neighbors, friends, and distant relatives, she seemed like the perfect mother. Every holiday was documented with smiling photographs. Every family gathering appeared flawless on social media. She regularly posted long captions about gratitude, family values, and unconditional love. People admired her. Many even told me how lucky I was to have such devoted parents. I usually smiled and changed the subject. The woman everyone saw online was very different from the woman I knew behind closed doors. She measured people by what they could do for her reputation. If someone had influence, wealth, or social connections, she invested endless time in them. If they couldn't improve her image, they slowly faded into the background, no matter how closely related they were. For years, I convinced myself that maybe I was imagining things. Maybe she was simply busy. Maybe adulthood naturally created distance between parents and children. But every birthday made the pattern harder to ignore. She often arrived late. Sometimes she left early. Occasionally she forgot entirely until someone reminded her. Still, I kept trying. Because she was my mother. 3 months before my 35th birthday, I decided this year would be different. Instead of hosting a party at my apartment, I reserved a private dining room at Harbor Lights, a waterfront restaurant overlooking Elliott Bay. It wasn't the most expensive restaurant in Seattle, but it had always been one of my favorites. The windows overlooked the water, and during sunset the entire dining room filled with warm golden light. I booked the reservation 6 weeks in advance. I personally called every member of my immediate family. My parents confirmed first. My father sounded distracted, but he promised they would be there. My mother sounded unusually enthusiastic. "Oh, Aria," she said cheerfully. 35 is special. We'll make sure this birthday is unforgettable." Those words stayed with me. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to believe her. During the following weeks, she occasionally texted me asking about the guest list, the restaurant menu, and what time everyone would arrive. Looking back now, those questions feel very different. At the time, they sounded like genuine interest. Now I know they served another purpose entirely. The morning of my birthday arrived with clear blue skies and unusually warm weather. I took the day off from work, visited my favorite bakery for coffee, answered birthday messages from friends, and spent the afternoon relaxing at home. By 5 o'clock, I was getting ready. I chose a navy blue dress that had been hanging untouched in my closet for months. I curled my hair, applied light makeup, and even wore the silver necklace my grandmother had given me before she passed away. As I looked into the mirror, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time.
Hope.
Maybe tonight would be different. Maybe this would finally be one birthday where my family simply enjoyed being together. At 6:15, I left my apartment and drove toward Harbor Lights. The restaurant overlooked the water, and as the sun slowly descended toward the horizon, the entire harbor shimmered with reflections of orange and gold. Inside, the hostess smiled warmly. "Happy birthday, Ms. Muller." She escorted me into the private dining room. The table had already been prepared. Fresh flowers stood in the center. 12 place settings surrounded the table. Soft music drifted through hidden speakers. Everything looked perfect, except every chair remained empty. I checked my phone. No messages. No missed calls. Only the reservation reminder that had appeared earlier that afternoon. 6:30 arrived. Still no one. The waiter politely asked if he should begin serving appetizers. I smiled awkwardly. "Let's give them another 10 minutes. He nodded kindly. By 6:45, I had refreshed my messages so many times that my thumb felt sore. Then my phone rang.
Mom.
Relief washed over me. Finally. I answered immediately. "Hi, Mom. Are you close?" Instead of apologizing, she laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not an embarrassed laugh. A genuinely amused laugh. "Oh, sweetheart," she said casually. "We're not coming." For several seconds, I couldn't respond. "What do you mean?" "We received a last-minute invitation to the Whitmore Foundation Gala." Her voice sounded excited. "It's much more important." I stared across the empty table. "Mom, today's my birthday." "I know." She laughed again. "You'll survive missing one dinner." Before I could say another word, she ended the call. I lowered the phone slowly. Around me, other families celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, and reunions. Laughter echoed across the restaurant. Servers carried beautifully prepared meals from one table to another. Meanwhile, I sat alone inside a room reserved for 12 people. A few moments later, another notification appeared. It was from my father. 3 words.
Don't make drama.
I read the message twice. Then a third time. No apology. No explanation. Just an instruction. As if being disappointed somehow made me the problem. I quietly thanked the waiter, canceled the remaining courses, paid the full reservation anyway, and walked outside before anyone could notice the tears gathering in my eyes. The evening air felt cooler than before. The waterfront, which had looked so beautiful an hour earlier, now felt strangely empty. I sat alone on a nearby bench overlooking Elliott Bay. For nearly 20 minutes, I watched ferries crossing the water while trying to convince myself this wasn't personal. Maybe the gala really was unavoidable. Maybe something important had happened.
Maybe.
My phone vibrated again. This time, it wasn't from anyone in my family. The sender's name made me freeze. Evelyn Brooks. I hadn't spoken to her in almost 5 years. The message contained only one sentence. "Aria, I think your mother lied about where she went tonight." I stared at the screen. Whatever I expected my birthday to become, it certainly wasn't this. The next morning, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard my mother's laughter again. Not because she had canceled, because she genuinely found it funny. I arrived at the cafe in Pioneer Square 15 minutes early. The morning air was crisp, and downtown Seattle was slowly waking up. Office workers hurried along the sidewalks carrying coffee cups while delivery trucks unloaded supplies for nearby businesses. I chose a table near the window where I could see everyone entering. At exactly 9 o'clock, Evelyn Brooks walked through the front door. She looked older than I remembered, but her posture was still confident. Her gray hair was neatly tied back, and she carried a leather tablet case under one arm. She smiled politely before sitting across from me. "Thank you for coming," she said. I almost didn't. I figured. The waiter brought coffee before quietly walking away. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. Finally, Evelyn slid her tablet across the table. "I don't normally involve myself in family matters," she began. "But when I saw your mother's social media post last night, something immediately felt wrong." I looked down at the screen. There was my mother's newest post. She was standing in an elegant evening gown beside my father. Both of them were smiling. The caption read, asterisk, honored to attend the Whitmore Foundation Charity Gala tonight. Always grateful to support such an incredible cause. Asterisk. Thousands of people had already liked the post. Dozens of comments praised my parents for their generosity. I clenched my jaw. They weren't there, Evelyn said quietly. I looked up. What do you mean? The gala never happened. For several seconds, I thought I had misunderstood. Evelyn opened another file. It was an official email from the Whitmore Foundation. Across the top were the words, "Event postponed." She continued, I worked with the foundation for years. 2 days before the gala, a pipe burst inside the ballroom. The venue suffered extensive water damage. She zoomed in on several photographs. The ballroom floor was flooded. Workers were removing damaged carpet. Tables had never been set up. There were no guests, Evelyn said. No speeches. No dinner. No gala. I stared at the photographs, then back at my mother's smiling post. So those pictures were taken somewhere else. I suddenly felt cold. If my parents hadn't attended the gala, where had they actually gone? Why are you telling me this? I asked. Evelyn hesitated. Because I knew your grandparents. That caught my attention immediately. My grandfather trusted very few people, she continued. Before he passed away, he often worried that one day certain members of the family would value money more than honesty. Her words lingered between us. I don't know what your mother was doing yesterday, she added, but I know she wasn't where she claimed to be. After we finished our coffee, Evelyn left. She never told me to investigate. She never suggested my parents had committed a crime. She simply gave me the truth she knew. The rest was up to me. Driving home, my mind replayed every conversation I'd had with my mother over the previous few months. Her repeated questions about my birthday schedule. Her insistence on confirming the dinner time. Her excitement whenever I mentioned the reservation. At first, those conversations had seemed thoughtful. Now they felt calculated. By the time I reached my apartment, the investigator inside me had taken over. I opened my laptop. If there really had been another event, someone had probably documented it. High-profile gatherings always left digital footprints. I started with local business news. Nothing. Then charity announcements. Still nothing. Next, I searched luxury hotels throughout Washington and Oregon. Hours passed. The afternoon sunlight slowly shifted across my living room floor while dozens of browser tabs accumulated on my screen. Around 4 o'clock, I finally found something unusual. A luxury resort outside Portland had hosted an invitation-only investment retreat for executives and private investors. The official website contained only a short promotional video. I clicked play. Business leaders stepped out of black SUVs. Photographers captured handshakes. People wearing conference badges entered the resort lobby. It looked ordinary, until I paused the video. A familiar face appeared for less than 2 seconds. I rewound, played it again, paused, zoomed in. My heartbeat quickened. Standing near the entrance was my mother. She wasn't alone. Beside her stood an older man wearing a navy suit. They were reviewing documents together. The folder in my mother's hands displayed a logo I had never seen before. Muller Family Holdings. I frowned. I'd never heard of that company. Not once. Not in any family conversation. Not in my grandfather's estate paperwork. Not anywhere. I captured screenshots and enlarged the image. The logo was unmistakable. Muller Family Holdings. Why would my mother attend a private investment retreat connected to a company she had never mentioned? And why did it happen on my birthday? Questions multiplied faster than answers. I opened my state's corporate registration database. Several businesses appeared under the Muller name. Most were unrelated. Then I found it. Muller Family Holdings LLC. Status: active. Date: established. 22 years earlier. My breathing slowed. 22 years. The company had existed for over 2 decades. How could an entire family investment company exist without me ever hearing about it? I opened the public filing. Most information had been redacted. However, one detail remained visible. Registered business activity. Real estate asset management. Real estate. My grandfather had spent his entire life buying commercial properties across Washington. Properties that, according to family stories, had supposedly been sold years ago. Had they really been sold? Or had they simply been transferred into a company nobody ever mentioned? I leaned back in my chair. For the first time since my birthday dinner, I stopped thinking about hurt feelings. This no longer felt like a family disagreement. It felt like someone had deliberately hidden something. Then another realization hit me. Yesterday wasn't just my birthday. Yesterday was also the exact day I turned 35. An age my grandfather used to mention surprisingly often whenever he discussed being responsible enough to handle family matters. At the time, I assumed he was speaking philosophically. Now I wasn't so sure. I closed my laptop and looked out the apartment window as evening settled over Seattle. Whatever secret my family had been protecting, I had only uncovered the first layer. The following morning, I contacted an attorney. Not because I planned to sue anyone. I simply wanted to know whether Muller Family Holdings was connected to my grandfather's estate. The attorney I chose specialized in trust and probate law. His name was Daniel Pierce, and after reviewing the corporate filings I had collected, he agreed to meet with me that afternoon. His office overlooked downtown Seattle. After listening carefully, he folded his hands and asked one question. Did your grandfather ever mention a family trust? I nodded slowly. He talked about protecting the family's future, but he never explained the details. Daniel turned toward his computer. If a trust exists, we can request certain records. Some documents aren't public, but beneficiaries have legal rights under specific circumstances. The word beneficiaries caught my attention. You think I might be one? I don't know, he replied honestly. But considering your last name and the timing of all this, it's worth finding out. We submitted several formal requests. Then we waited. 3 days later, Daniel called. His voice sounded unusually serious. I think you should come in. I drove directly to his office. When I arrived, several thick folders were already spread across the conference table. Daniel pointed toward the first document. This, he said, is the Muller Family Trust. I stared at the title page. The trust had been created by my grandfather nearly 30 years earlier. Its purpose was straightforward. Protect family-owned commercial real estate and distribute voting rights equally among his grandchildren once each reached the age of 35. I looked up. I'm 35 now. Daniel nodded. As of your birthday. A chill ran through me. He opened another document. According to the trust agreement, every eligible beneficiary automatically gained voting authority on their 35th birthday unless they voluntarily declined in writing. My stomach tightened. Voluntarily declined. Daniel quietly placed another sheet of paper in front of me. I need you to look at this carefully. It was a declaration. At the bottom appeared my printed name. Beside it, my signature. Or at least something pretending to be my signature. The document claimed I had permanently surrendered my voting rights one day before my birthday. I didn't even need a second glance. I never signed this. I didn't think you did. My pulse quickened. The signature looked convincing from a distance. The same looping letters. The same initials. But several details were wrong. The capital A curved differently. The final stroke of my last name ended too sharply. Someone had copied my handwriting without truly understanding it. Daniel leaned back. If this signature is forged, every action relying on it could become legally vulnerable. I suddenly remembered something. My mother canceled my birthday dinner exactly 1 hour before everyone was supposed to arrive. Daniel remained silent. I continued thinking aloud. If I had been invited to a legal meeting instead of sitting alone at that restaurant, you might have immediately questioned this document, he finished.
Exactly.
The empty birthday dinner no longer seemed like simple neglect. It looked like a carefully planned distraction. Daniel opened another folder. This is where things become even more interesting. Inside were meeting minutes from an executive session held at a luxury resort outside Portland. The date matched my birthday. The location matched the promotional video Evelyn had shown me. Attendees discussed changes to voting authority inside Muller Family Holdings. Several resolutions had passed unanimously. One note stood out. Beneficiary Aria Muller voluntarily declined participation. There it was again. The lie had become part of the official record. Daniel sighed. Fortunately, forged documents don't magically become valid simply because someone files them. What happens now? We verify the signature. He explained that certified forensic handwriting examiners regularly testified in court. If they concluded the signature wasn't mine, the entire chain of decisions made during that meeting could be challenged. For the first time since my birthday, I felt something stronger than sadness. Determination. Whoever orchestrated this believed I would quietly disappear from the process. They clearly didn't know what I did for a living. Investigating suspicious paperwork wasn't new to me. It was literally my profession. Over the next several days, Daniel and I assembled everything we could find. Copies of my authentic signatures from bank records, passport applications, property documents, employment contracts, anything demonstrating years of consistent handwriting. Every sample strengthened our position. Yet one question still bothered me. Who had actually forged my signature? I assumed the answer would eventually point toward my mother. After all, she had lied about the gala. She had canceled my birthday. She had been present at the investment retreat. But assumptions weren't evidence. My work had taught me that making conclusions too early often led investigators down the wrong path. Late Friday afternoon, Daniel received another package from the trust administrator. Inside were internal attendance records from the Portland meeting. As we reviewed the names, one unfamiliar title caught my attention. Independent Documentation Consultant. The consultant's signature appeared beside mine as the witness. What exactly does this person do? I asked. Daniel frowned. Normally, verify paperwork. So, the person responsible for checking signatures also witnessed yours. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. That coincidence felt impossible to ignore. Someone responsible for preventing fraud had signed off on a forged document. Either they were astonishingly incompetent, or they knew exactly what they were doing. Daniel immediately recommended hiring a forensic document examiner before confronting anyone. I agreed. We needed facts, not accusations. As I gathered my papers to leave, my phone buzzed. It wasn't my mother. It wasn't my father. The message came from my younger cousin, Noah. We hadn't spoken much in recent years. His text was short. Can we meet tonight? I found something from the Portland meeting that you need to see. Asterisk, asterisk. I stared at the screen. For days, every answer had created even bigger questions. Something told me Noah's discovery was about to change everything again. I met Noah that same evening. He asked me to come alone. No lawyers. No relatives. No phone calls beforehand. We agreed to meet at a quiet public park overlooking Lake Washington just before sunset. Families walked along the trails while children played near the shoreline, making the conversation around us feel strangely disconnected from the tension building inside me. Noah was already sitting on a bench when I arrived. He looked exhausted. Dark circles framed his eyes, and he kept checking over his shoulder as if he expected someone to follow him. "You came," he said quietly. "You sounded serious." I am. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Finally, he reached into his backpack and pulled out a large manila envelope. "I shouldn't have these." He handed it to me. "But I think you need them more than anyone." I opened the envelope carefully. Inside were printed emails, meeting schedules, handwritten notes, and copies of internal agendas from the Portland retreat. "Where did these come from?" I asked. "I attended the meeting." I looked up. "You were there?" He nodded. "I thought it was just an annual family business conference. Nobody told me anything about voting rights or trust documents until I arrived." He rubbed his forehead before continuing. "Everyone kept saying you had decided not to participate." I never declined. "I know that now." He pointed toward one of the printed emails. "You should read this first." I unfolded the page. The email had been sent nearly 3 weeks before my birthday. The sender was my mother. The recipient list included several executives connected to Muller Family Holdings. The subject line read, "Birthday scheduling." My chest tightened. The message itself was painfully short. Asterisk, schedule the shareholders meeting on Aria's birthday. She'll already have personal plans that evening and won't interfere with the agenda. Asterisk. I slowly lowered the paper. There it was, written in plain language. My birthday dinner hadn't simply been forgotten. It had been intentionally used to keep me occupied. I swallowed hard before reaching for the next document. This one was even worse. It wasn't from my mother. It came from the chairman of Muller Family Holdings. Asterisk. If Arya unexpectedly appears, delay any discussion involving beneficiary voting until after she leaves. We cannot afford unnecessary complications. Asterisk. I stared at the words. Complications. That was how they described me. Not granddaughter. Not beneficiary. A complication. Noah watched my reaction carefully. I didn't understand what they meant at the time, he admitted. I assumed there was some family disagreement. When did you realize something was wrong? The meeting. He leaned back against the bench. The chairman announced that you had voluntarily surrendered your voting rights. I remember thinking that didn't sound like you. He smiled faintly. You've always been stubborn. Despite everything, I almost laughed. That was probably the nicest thing anyone in my family had said to me in years. What happened next? I asked. They passed several resolutions. He pointed toward another packet. They redistributed voting percentages almost immediately. I skimmed through the meeting minutes. Every major decision relied on one assumption, that I had permanently removed myself from the trust. Without my vote, several proposals passed unanimously. With my vote, the outcome could have been completely different. I suddenly noticed another attachment clipped behind the meeting minutes. It was a seating chart. Names surrounded a large conference table. My chair had already been assigned, even though they claimed I wasn't participating. I frowned. If they believed I'd declined, why reserve a seat?
Exactly.
Someone had expected the possibility that I might appear, which meant they weren't completely confident their plan would work. I turned another page. This one contained handwritten notes from someone attending the meeting. Most entries summarized financial discussions. Then one sentence caught my attention. Asterisk. Consultant confirmed signature package delivered before session. Asterisk. Signature package. Not signature. Package. Plural. Daniel had mentioned an outside documentation consultant. Apparently, that consultant had arrived carrying multiple prepared documents. One of them had included my forged declaration. I looked back at Noah. Did you ever meet the consultant?
No.
But I overheard something. What? The chairman thanked him for making sure every administrative obstacle had been handled before anyone noticed. Administrative obstacle. Another phrase that suddenly carried a very different meaning. I carefully returned the papers to the envelope. Noah, why are you helping me? He looked toward the lake before answering. Because Grandpa loved fairness. His voice became softer. I remember something he told me when I was 16. He smiled sadly. He said money should never decide who belongs in a family. Silence settled between us. The evening breeze carried the sound of distant boats across the water. Eventually, Noah spoke again. There's something else. He reached into his jacket pocket and removed a small flash drive. I copied this before I left Portland. I accepted it carefully. What's on it? Security camera footage from the resort. My eyes widened. The conference staff uploaded everything into a shared archive before deleting local backups. I downloaded the files because I thought I'd need them for reimbursement paperwork. You watched them?
No.
I was afraid to. Back at my apartment that night, I inserted the flash drive into my laptop. Several video folders appeared. Hallways. Lobby. Conference entrance. Reception area. Most clips showed ordinary guests walking through the resort. Then I opened one recording from early that morning. The timestamp displayed 8:12 a.m. The conference room door opened. The chairman entered first. Behind him walked my mother. Several minutes later, another man carrying a locked document case entered the room. He wore a visitor badge. The badge identified him as the independent documentation consultant. I watched carefully. No one exchanged paperwork in the hallway. No forged signatures appeared on camera. No obvious crime unfolded. But one detail immediately stood out. My mother looked genuinely surprised when the consultant removed several documents from his case. She leaned toward the chairman and asked something. He answered. She frowned. Then she slowly nodded. I replayed the scene 3 more times. The body language told a story the documents couldn't. My mother clearly knew about the meeting. She clearly helped arrange the timing. But she didn't appear to know every detail of what would happen inside that room. That realization complicated everything. For days, I had convinced myself she personally forged my signature. Now I wasn't so certain. She had lied. She had manipulated me. She had deliberately kept me away. But the actual forgery, that responsibility, seemed to belong to someone else. The next morning, Daniel called before I even finished my coffee. The forensic examiner completed the preliminary analysis. My heart began pounding. And the signature wasn't created by you. I closed my eyes. We expected that. There's more. His voice became noticeably more serious. The examiner believes the forgery was professionally prepared by someone with extensive experience reproducing legal signatures. I tightened my grip on the phone. This wasn't an amateur copying your handwriting. He paused. This was someone who had likely done it before. For the first time, I realized I wasn't dealing with a single dishonest family member. I was dealing with a carefully organized operation. And exposing my mother's lie had only uncovered the surface. The forensic report changed everything. Until that point, I had been driven by emotion. Now I had evidence. Daniel called me into his office the following afternoon to review the complete report. The examiner had compared dozens of authentic signatures from my passport application, mortgage paperwork, employment contracts, tax documents, and banking records against the signature used to surrender my voting rights. The conclusion occupied only 1 page. The signature attributed to Aria Muller was not written by Aria Muller. There was no uncertainty, no hesitation, no room for interpretation. The declaration submitted before the shareholders' meeting was fraudulent. Daniel looked at me across the conference table. Now we move forward. What happens next? We file. Within 48 hours, our legal team submitted a civil lawsuit requesting that every resolution passed during the Portland meeting be suspended until the court determined whether the voting process had been manipulated. The lawsuit also requested immediate preservation of every internal email, security recording, financial record, and communication connected to the meeting. No one could quietly destroy evidence anymore. By law, everything had to be preserved. That afternoon, Daniel gave me one piece of advice. Don't argue online. I smiled. I wasn't planning to. Good. Because facts are stronger than opinions. That sentence stayed with me. For several days, I said nothing publicly. Meanwhile, rumors began spreading inside the family. Several relatives suddenly started calling me. Some acted concerned. Others sounded strangely nervous. One aunt insisted the situation had all been a misunderstanding. Another relative warned me that lawsuits could permanently damage the family. Not one of them asked whether the signature was actually mine. They only wanted the conflict to disappear. Their silence told me everything. Then my mother finally called. I almost let it go to voicemail. Instead, I answered, "Hello." She sounded calm.
Too calm.
"Aria, we need to talk." "I'm listening." "I heard you've involved lawyers." "Yes." A long pause followed. "You don't understand everything that happened." "Then explain it." "I can't over the phone." I waited. She never continued. Instead, she changed direction. "Think about what this is doing to the family's reputation." I looked out the window of my apartment. The Seattle skyline stretched beneath gray afternoon clouds. "My reputation wasn't your concern on my birthday." Another silence. Then she sighed. "I never wanted this to become public." "Neither did I." "You could have told me the truth." "I couldn't." "Why?" Again? No answer. She quietly ended the call. For the first time in my life, my mother had an opportunity to explain herself. She chose silence instead. 3 days later, Daniel forwarded me a copy of the company's official response to the lawsuit. The chairman denied every allegation. According to their filing, I had willingly declined my voting rights. The signature, they claimed, had been properly witnessed. Reading those words only strengthened my resolve. They weren't admitting a mistake. They were doubling down. That evening, I made a decision. I opened my laptop. I wasn't interested in writing an emotional post. I wasn't interested in insults. I wanted every statement I made to be verifiable. So I waited until the lawsuit became part of the public court record. Once it did, I uploaded copies of the publicly filed documents. No confidential records. No private correspondence. Only court filings that anyone could legally access. Above the documents, I wrote a single paragraph. Asterisk last week. My family told me they skipped my 35th birthday because they had more important plans. Yesterday, I learned those plans included a shareholders' meeting where documents claimed I voluntarily surrendered rights I never agreed to give away. I believe facts deserve more attention than appearances, so I'm sharing the public court filings exactly as they were submitted. Asterisk. Nothing more. Nothing less. I clicked publish. Then I closed my laptop. I went to bed without checking the responses. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Hundreds of notifications covered my screen. Friends, former coworkers,
College classmates.
people I hadn't spoken to in years. Many simply asked if I was okay. Others had already read the court filings themselves. Then reporters began calling. Not gossip reporters. Business journalists. Corporate governance blogs. Legal analysts. The story wasn't spreading because of family drama. It was spreading because forged shareholder documents represented a serious legal issue. Within 24 hours, several publications reported that Mueller family holdings faced allegations involving fraudulent voting records. Investors started asking questions. Business partners requested clarification. Members of the board demanded emergency meetings. Pressure grew by the hour. Late that afternoon, another headline appeared. Independent director resigns from Mueller family holdings pending investigation. An hour later, another resignation followed. Then another. The carefully controlled image my mother had spent decades protecting wasn't destroyed by my words. It collapsed under documented evidence. That evening, my phone rang once more.
Mom.
This time, her voice sounded completely different. No confidence. No laughter. Only fear. Arya? She hesitated. I made a mistake. I remained silent. I shouldn't have lied about the gala.
No.
You shouldn't have. I thought missing one dinner wouldn't matter. I closed my eyes. It wasn't the dinner. I know. No. You still don't. Another long silence settled between us. Finally, she whispered something I never expected to hear. I didn't know they were going to use a forged signature. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. That admission matched exactly what the security footage had suggested. She had helped create the opportunity, but someone else had carried out the forgery. I believe you didn't write my name, I said quietly, but you still helped keep me away. Her breathing caught. I know. It wasn't a complete confession. It wasn't enough to erase what had happened, but it was the first honest sentence I had heard from her since my birthday. We ended the call without saying goodbye. The following week, the court scheduled the first hearing. For months, my family had relied on secrecy. Now, every important question would be answered in a courtroom where evidence mattered more than reputation. And this time, everyone would have to tell the truth under oath. For months later, I walked into the King County Courthouse carrying a single binder. It wasn't thick. It wasn't dramatic. Inside were only the documents that mattered. The forged declaration, the forensic handwriting report, the trust agreement, the meeting minutes, the internal emails, and the security footage timeline. Everything had been organized exactly the way I would prepare an investigation for one of my own clients. Outside the courtroom, reporters gathered behind the designated media line. Camera shutters clicked as attorneys entered the building. I ignored them. This day wasn't about headlines. It was about answers. When the hearing began, the courtroom was almost silent. The judge reviewed the preliminary evidence before allowing both sides to present their arguments. The company's attorneys insisted the voting process had been conducted properly. They argued that everyone had acted in good faith. Then Daniel stood. He introduced the forensic examiner. For nearly 2 hours, the examiner explained every detail of the signature analysis. Stroke pressure, letter formation, pen movement, natural writing rhythm. Every scientific comparison pointed toward the same conclusion. The declaration had been forged. There was no credible evidence that I had signed it. The courtroom remained completely quiet. Then Daniel introduced the internal emails Noah had preserved. The judge carefully reviewed the correspondence. One message immediately drew attention. Schedule the shareholders meeting on Aria's birthday. She'll already have personal plans that evening and won't interfere with the agenda. The judge looked toward the company's legal team. Is the authenticity of this email disputed? Their lead attorney quietly answered, No, Your Honor. The courtroom grew even quieter. The next witness was the independent documentation consultant. For weeks, I had wondered whether he would deny everything. He didn't. After being placed under oath, he admitted that he had never personally watched me sign the declaration. Instead, he acknowledged that the document had been handed to him shortly before the meeting with instructions that all beneficiary paperwork had already been completed. That admission changed the entire case. Daniel asked one final question. Did you independently verify the identity of the person who signed the declaration attributed to Ms. Mueller? The consultant lowered his eyes.
No.
Those two letters echoed through the courtroom.
No.
The chairman testified later that afternoon. Unlike the consultant, he resisted every question. He claimed he believed the paperwork was legitimate. However, when confronted with the internal emails discussing my absence and the timing of the meeting, his explanations became increasingly inconsistent. The judge noticed. Everyone noticed. By the end of the hearing, the court issued several immediate rulings. Every resolution passed during the Portland shareholders' meeting was temporarily suspended. Control over the trust's voting process would remain frozen until the final judgment. An independent administrator was appointed to oversee all future trust activity. Several weeks later, the final decision arrived. The court ruled that the declaration surrendering my voting rights was legally invalid. Every corporate action relying upon that declaration was overturned. New shareholder meetings would have to be conducted under independent supervision. The chairman was referred to state prosecutors for potential criminal fraud charges involving falsified corporate records. As for my mother, the court found no evidence that she had created or signed the forged declaration. She avoided criminal liability, but the evidence clearly demonstrated that she had deliberately helped arrange the meeting on my birthday while concealing its true purpose. The board of Mueller Family Holdings voted to remove her from every leadership position inside the organization. Her influence disappeared almost overnight. My father submitted his resignation only a few days later. For years, he had chosen silence whenever it was easier than speaking the truth. Eventually, silence carried its own consequences. The trust itself underwent major reforms. Independent financial oversight became mandatory. Every beneficiary received complete access to annual financial reports. Future voting procedures required direct identity verification. The secrecy that had protected a handful of people for decades finally came to an end. Several months after the case concluded, I received a handwritten letter. Not an email, not a text message, a letter. It was from my mother. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't defend her decisions. She simply admitted that she had spent most of her life believing appearances were more important than honesty. By the time she understood the difference, she had already lost the trust of the people closest to her. I folded the letter and placed it inside a drawer. I never responded, not because I hated her, but because forgiveness and reconciliation are not the same thing. Some relationships cannot return to what they once were, and pretending otherwise only creates new lies. Instead, I focused on the family members who had chosen integrity when it would have been easier to stay quiet. Noah and I grew closer than we had ever been. We visited our grandfather's favorite lakeside cabin together that autumn. For the first time in years, conversations about our family weren't filled with suspicion. They were filled with honesty. Looking back now, I realize my 35th birthday wasn't actually ruined. It became the day everything hidden finally came into the light. The dinner reservation I had carefully planned was forgotten. The candles were never lit. The cake was never served. But that empty table led me toward a truth that changed the rest of my life. If my mother had simply attended my birthday dinner, smiled for a few photographs, and kept the secret buried a little longer, I might never have questioned anything. Sometimes the greatest betrayal isn't being abandoned on an important day. It's discovering that someone expected you to remain distracted while your future was quietly decided without you. Fortunately for me, they underestimated one thing. They underestimated how difficult it is to fool someone whose career is built on following evidence wherever it leads. Thank you for staying with me through my story. If you enjoyed this journey of family secrets, unexpected twists, and justice finally catching up with those who believed they would never be questioned, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. If you were in my position, would you have exposed the truth publicly, or would you have tried to settle everything behind closed doors? I'd love to hear your answer.